Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15, going on 16 novels of suspense. My current novel is One Wrong Word, which you can see displayed casually on the door behind me. It is now in a second printing, and I thank you very much for that. I also want to tell you very, very briefly before we get to our guest that this week only, ending Friday, One Wrong Word is on sale for $2.99, the ebook, I mean, wherever ebooks are sold. So run, not right now, after we hear from Tasha Coryell, after the show today, run, and click, and get your copy of One Wrong Word for only $2.99. Perfect for our vacation, perfect for airplane, perfect for the beach, perfect for staying home. I'd adore you to read it and tell me about it. And today you can get it for $2.99. So I'm so happy about that. So enough about me, because I cannot wait to talk to the fabulous Tasha Coryell, whose debut thriller, Love Letters to a Serial Killer, look at that, it's hilarious, is out next Tuesday. You all, it is hilarious. It's smart, it's mordant, it's witty, it's unique, it's a page turner. It's a solid mystery about Jenna Blum is saying, everybody get Hank's book on sale. Thank you, darling Jenna Blum. We'll talk about you in a minute. It is a solid mystery with the most engaging, most unusual, most unique heroine you have ever met. Shannon Hansen says, fun cover. I'm going to click over and look at all of your comments now. It is the most fun cover. And Tasha, hold up I have the advanced reader copy, but Tasha has the real copy, the hard copy comes out next Tuesday. Show us the back. Show us the cool back.
Yeah, there's a handprint that's like translucent on the back that you can see if you shine it under the light, which my husband noticed.
Oh, Tasha, I think has
noticed it. Like he noticed it like hours after I opened the package.
That's incredibly funny. And so your publisher didn't tell you that they were having that super secret, fabulous surprise?
I don't think so. Like they might have at some point, and it just left my brain with like all the information I was taking in. But it was a surprise to me. Like I was like, oh wow, look at the cover. It looks great. And then I like flipped to the back. And then like hours later, my husband was like, wait a minute, is that a handprint? And I thought he meant that there was like a smudge on the book rather than like a purposeful handprint.
That is really clever. And that's also just sort of inside publishing stuff. That's really expensive. And it means that your publisher loves the book and is really behind this book, as well they should be, because it is downright hilarious and unique. I could just, Emily says, love the graphic of the book title. Yes, that is really funny. And it says, P.S. please don't kill me, which is just, well, you'll laugh throughout. Let me ask you, Tasha, welcome. And I'll talk to you about your bio in a second. But your book, your first novel, comes out next Tuesday. What is that like for you this week before Pub Day?
The thing that I keep telling people is I sold this book in October 2022, and they were like, yeah, we'll publish it in like the summer of 2024. And I was like, okay, great. And that date didn't seem real to me. Like they have a joke on the show Parks and Rec about like scheduling all the meetings for March 31st, thinking that March 31st didn't exist. That's sort of how I feel about like book publication, is like this whole time it hasn't felt real. Yeah. And I'm just waiting for the moment where it really settles in and starts to feel like a real thing that's happening.
Well, you've gotten such great reviews and everybody is so enthusiastic about this. I was reading somewhere at the London Book Festival that people had decided that this was absolutely the book of the year, the absolute must-read novel. I mean, there must have been a moment, handprint aside, when you opened the box of books and saw that it was real. Can you talk, what was that like?
So what's really funny is that I haven't actually opened, I got like an envelope with one copy in it. And that's the copy that I have, is like the copy from the envelope. I have the boxes with the other copies in it, but it's like I'm waiting for the right moment to do the full unboxing. Like, I'm like, okay, this is going to be like a real emotional thing. I want to like look cute. I want to feel good. I want to record a moment. And so I just am waiting. Like, maybe I'll do it on pub day. We'll see.
That is adorable. I think that authors are so quirky and funny. We all have our little mystical things that we do. We all have our little quirks. And we all, I mean, one of the things about being a writer is that everything is so, as you say, 2024, that's so far away. And now it's here. It's a way, though, when you open that box of books, it's a way of making it be a concrete thing that's happened. Susie Baldwin is saying, congrats, Tasha. And Sherry Steuben is here, and Catherine Holm is here, and Renee Herskowitz is here. This is Lori Alcon Brown is here saying, and Renee says, at least you're here now. And Beverly says, congratulations on your coming release. Catherine says, excited to hear more about this book. Kim Rutter says, how exciting. Congratulations. This is part of the launch, though, isn't it, Tasha? That people you don't even know yet are enthusiastic about coming to hear about your book and to get to know you.
Yeah, it's been wild just to have people reach out. Actually, there's a French edition, and the French edition has already been released. And so I keep getting these posts that I'm tagged in on Instagram for the French edition in French, which I don't speak. And it's so charming to me. And I really love, I don't have a physical copy of the French edition, but I feel like I love the French version because I don't speak it. So I'm like, wow, look at this perfect book. Like, there's nothing for me to critique because I don't speak that language. It just looks
when
beautiful.
you see the words like merveilleuse and fantastique and all those kinds of things, that's got to be good. Look, that's got to be good. Is it the same title in French? Is it just translated?
Yes, it's the same title in French translated.
That's
and the cover is an offshoot of the UK cover. So the US and the UK have different covers. And
you
the
have
French
a UK cover?
Yeah, I don't have the UK copy, unfortunately, so I can't show it to you. It is online, but I don't have a physical version yet. I'm still waiting on that.
We'll have to look it up, you all. Not right now, but when this is over, we'll go check out the foreign editions of Love Letters to a Serial Killer. I just love that you don't even have the books, Tasha. That is really funny. I always take, when I open my book boxes, the first book I touch in the book box, I just take that right upstairs and put it in my shelf. That pristine book number 1 out of box number 1 is the one that I always save. So we all have our little rituals and our little quirks. So I absolutely love that. Let me quickly. I see everybody coming here. Sherry Steuben is here, and Susie Baldwin is here. Jenna Blum is here. Hi, hey, Jenna. And Vicki Gregory. Mary Garrett is here saying, make the box opening an event. Yes, I love that. And London is here saying it makes his Tuesdays. And we will have we'll have so many of these questions when we get to the end of our interview. But let me tell you all very, very quickly, A Mighty Blaze, if you don't know, you should, that A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic more than 4 years ago, bizarrely, talking about time having no form, by the powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, to keep us all talking about books and learning about new books and meeting new authors, and maybe find some wonderful new authors and sort of keep our writing and reading community together. And we are still growing strong, and we are still persevering. And that is why we are so pleased today to have Tasha Coryell, the debut novelist of Love Letters to a Serial Killer, which I promise you will absolutely adore. Let me tell you a little bit about our author, and then we will let Tasha talk. Tasha Coryell's debut novel, Love Letters to a Serial Killer, is coming from Berkeley next week and Orion in the UK. The starred review in Library Journal calls it shocking, witty, and wild. It calls it a must-have mystery, and we will talk about all of those things. Tasha holds an MFA in creative writing and a PhD in composition and rhetoric from the University of Alabama. She currently lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, with her husband, son, and greyhound, who she says might come in the room. So if you see a greyhound, it's all good. It's Tasha's. In her spare time, the bio says, Tasha likes to run, cross stitch, and watch copious amounts of television. So we will ask you about TV later, but first, let's get to this marvelous book. Tell us a little bit, give us the setup of Love Letters to a Serial Killer.
Yeah, so Love Letters to a Serial Killer surrounds the character of Hannah, who I envision as a very millennial character. I'm a millennial myself. So she works at a nonprofit and she really wants to make a difference in the world, but she finds herself being very underpaid. She's not appreciated in the workplace. And then outside the workplace, all of her close friends are getting married and leaving her behind. And she's seeing this guy who like doesn't have a full-time job and plays in a band, and he won't even fully commit to her. Like he doesn't even really like her like that. And so she's really frustrated in all of these aspects of her life. And so she starts getting very invested in these murders that are happening. And then eventually someone's arrested and charged with the crimes, and she starts writing him while he's in prison awaiting his trial, and she ends up going to see his trial, which is across the country. So she like leaves behind every facet of her life to go see his trial, and then he ends up getting acquitted, and they end up together, and she has to figure out whether or not he actually killed the women that he was accused of killing, and whether or not she wants him to be a killer.
Now, and you all just heard what Tasha said, and it sounds like there must be spoilers in that, and there is not one spoiler in that. It's all on the back cover. Everything Tasha said, you already know when you start this book, and that is one of the things that's so amazing about it, because it's a masterclass in voice. And it's a masterclass in storytelling. And it's a masterclass in plot and structure. It completely is. And it's absolutely seamlessly done. Hannah is hilarious and obsessed with true crime, especially this one case where several women have been murdered in the same place, and they're on the lookout for the serial killer. She's like a mess. I mean, she's a mess. She doesn't do her job. She only listens to podcasts and on message boards about the serial killings. But on the other hand, she's kind of irresistible. How did you balance this? She's almost whiny, but then she's adorable. She's almost idiotic, but then she's brilliant. She's almost a slacker, but then she works really hard at what she wants to do. Talk a little bit about how you created her.
I think that I find characters who are like relatable messes to be really endearing. So there are lots of ways in which I don't relate to Hannah. Like, for instance, I have a really nice husband. I consider myself a hard worker, but I do relate to how she feels emotionally. So when I wrote this book, I wasn't working for a nonprofit like she does, but I was working in academia. I was teaching English, and I wasn't in a tenure track position. So I had very little job security. I also made very little money. A lot of people think that if you like teach at the university level, you make a lot of money, which is absolutely not true. Like, even if you're a tenure track professor, you still don't make a lot of money. And there was no room for promotion whatsoever. Like, it just felt like it didn't matter what I did. And it's very demotivating to be in a position where no one cares how hard you're working. There's no recognition, financial or otherwise. And I think that even if you're someone who wants to do well, who's smart and capable, like being in a position like that, you just start to check out, right? You're like, why am I going to try if I'm not being rewarded in any way for my efforts? And she's frustrated too with like her dating life, which I think is very relatable for a lot of people, right? Where they really want a relationship, someone that'll commit to them. And then especially if you're like a woman looking for a relationship with a man, the man's like, oh no, wait a minute. I don't want to commit to anything. And it doesn't matter like who the woman is. Like she can be the most beautiful, successful person in the world. And it's just about like this commitment phobia. So she's experiencing all of these frustrations in her life, and they are not necessarily channeled in the healthiest way, but it's how she chooses to channel them, which is into writing letters which turn into love letters to a serial killer or an accused serial killer.
But in the essence of it, what Hannah really wants, she wants something to care about, and she wants someone to care about her, which is such a classic desire that we all have. She just doesn't always go about it in the most logical of ways.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like she really just wants to be seen by someone, and she really wants someone to like recognize what she brings to the world and, you know, appreciate her as a person, which is why she so easily like sort of falls into this relationship, because all of a sudden she has this man writing letters to her in which he's complimenting her, and she's not getting that stuff from the men that she knows in real life.
I mean, that's one of the things that's so hilarious about this book. And if you just joined us, we're talking about Love Letters to a Serial Killer, which comes out next Tuesday, you all, from debut novelist Tasha Coryell. She falls in love with this alleged serial killer, and she starts telling herself, well, he's a serial killer. How can I be in love with a serial killer? And then she says, well, it's not as bad as some people. You know, I talk to him more than I've talked to some guys I've dated. And so everybody has a little problem. And she rationalizes why this relationship is okay. How much fun was it for you to write about her and the way she, I keep using the word rationalizes, but that's true. The way she decides that everything would be fine because it's better than her life is now.
I like that you use the word fun, because people ask me, they're like, well, what do you hope that readers get out of this book? And like, fun is the number one thing. Like when I decided that I was really going to focus on getting an agent to sell this book, I was sort of in a reading rut where I was just reading things that weren't totally scratching the itch. And I was like, you know what? My book is just as good as these books, right? Like I can get an agent, I can get this published. I'm really going to dedicate myself to this. And, you know, when I was writing it, I was in the middle of doing a PhD in composition and rhetoric, which is still a field of English, but it was definitely an academic degree rather than a creative degree. So I was doing all of this work that required really intensive thought. I was teaching full time. I really didn't have a lot of time to write creatively, but this was my outlet, right? Like this was the thing that I enjoyed doing the most. And it was like, I have all these other things going on, but I still need to make time to work on this because it's what I love. And I feel like being in that situation, it made me realize like how much I just really love creative writing and how fun it is to write a novel. And I didn't necessarily appreciate it in the same way before that. Like I was like, wow, this is so much better than anything else I do with my time.
But did you have bad days writing this? I mean, it comes across it's so organized and so gorgeously structured, and it makes so much sense. And it is a joy to read. And this is essentially your first novel. Were there days that you thought, nobody's going to understand this, or this is too difficult?
Well, I have the caveat that I've written other novels that haven't necessarily been read by anyone. What I would do is like I really procrastinated on getting an agent. I just like didn't like querying agents, so I would just like write another book. So I wrote several novels before this one. I've written novels after this one, but this was one that just really stuck with me and stuck in my brain. And it went through a lot of revisions, and there were a lot of changes that were made both by me. There were changes that I made when I got my agent. You know, there were changes I made with the editors, but I never think of it as having a bad writing day. Like I don't really get writer's block anymore. I'm always excited to sit down and write. Sometimes that writing does not make it into a final draft, and that's okay. Like other people don't need to see everything. All of that work is necessary to get to where the book ends up.
Oh, I so agree. Nobody needs to know what you took out, but you needed it to get there. I love your insight, both humorous and a little deep, about people's desire and interest in true crime, and why we're fascinated by that, and how exploitive it can be. And you create this sort of gaggle of women who come to the trial with Hannah. And that group of women is one of the funniest set pieces I've ever read in my life. Talk a little bit about those women and how they came together, and what you think about our focus, our obsession with true crime. Some, not all of ours, but some of ours.
Yeah, so like me, Hannah is from Minnesota, and the trial is taking place in Georgia. And that was because I lived in Alabama for 11 years while I was getting my MFA. And then later I taught at the University of Alabama and got my PhD. So the characters are very inspired by like women, like an amalgamation sort of women that I met when I was in Alabama. Like there's Dottie, who's like married but separated from her husband, and she's in love with William too, but also like kind of with her husband. And then there's Lauren. I actually have a good friend named Lauren who's obsessed with true crime. She hasn't read the book yet, but she knows that there's a character named after her in the book. But one of the things that I think is interesting is that there are a lot of women who are interested in true crime. And even if you're not like obsessed with it, you've still probably watched like a documentary or read a book or listened to a podcast. Like you don't need to be an obsessive person to like delve into that world. And I think it's interesting. Like I understand that there are ethical issues with true crime. Like a lot of it focuses on killers who are often men versus the victims, who are often people who come from marginalized groups. Like, I think people who are interested in true crime still do understand that these are ethical issues, but then at the same time, it's like hard to pull yourself away. You're like, I recognize that we're like taking in this culture and like holding up these monsters, but also I kind of love the monsters and I want more of them. There's like this ethical.
Yes, I mean, we always think about
ethical dilemma.
Yes, it is an ethical dilemma because we're fascinated by it and know we shouldn't be, but yet we are. I mean, you refer to in the novel, you refer to Ted Bundy, and you make your serial killer, or not, the alleged serial killer, absolutely handsome. He's a lawyer. He's attractive. He's smart. He comes from a fabulous family. And there's a lot of discussion about sort of the class system too. Your satire of dating and social media and the class system, and women's place in society and how we think of criminals, all of those things. How do you balance all of that social commentary and keep it light but nevertheless thought-provoking with a solid mystery underneath? I mean, did William actually kill all those women? The evidence points to it. So you had to balance your funny story with a real mystery. How top of mind was that to you?
I honestly think that the mystery portion was the thing that I thought about last. So I got an MFA in creative writing, and in MFA school, like they usually focus very heavily on like literary fiction. And while I was in school, I was in getting my MFA from 2012 to 2016. And, you know, there were a lot of current events in that time period that were not wonderful. And so it was just difficult, I think, to like, at the end of the day, I read every single day before I go to bed. And it was really hard at the end of the day to get myself to read very serious literary fiction. And, you know, it's not that it's not enjoyable. It's just like sometimes you want to escape into something. And so that's when I really started reading thrillers. But I think that I didn't start thinking of myself as a thriller writer until later on. So I think that the book really started as like this emotional journey, which like literary fiction is all about emotional journeys, like emotional journeys where nothing happens. And so I like really had a good grasp on the emotional journey. And I really had a good grasp on like the social commentary, because I was like doing like later on I was like doing this PhD and doing all this like theory reading, and so I like feel like I'm very good at handling that. And then I was like, okay, time to get serious about the mystery. What is going on here? And I think that like my agent and my editors were really helpful in that regard.
That is so fascinating, because if I had had to guess, I would have thought that your first thought was the mystery. What if someone fell in love with a serial killer somehow? And was he guilty or not? But that wasn't the first thought.
So this novel actually originally started as a short story. And in the short story, it's very short. It's like maybe like 1,000 words. In the short story, the premise is a woman is in love with a serial killer. She knows that he's a serial killer. Like in the story, he's for sure a serial killer. And but something goes wrong at the trial. That means that he ends up like there's like a mistrial or something happens. And so he's freed, and she starts dating him. And then he turns out to be really boring. And she's like, no, wait a minute. Like, you were supposed to be a serial killer. Why don't you want to kill me? Like, why did you want to kill all those other women and not me? And she sort of like tries to bait him into killing her. And so like at the very beginning, it wasn't a mystery at all. And then I was like, okay, I want to turn this into a novel. I think in the novel version, it needs to be a question, like, is he a killer or is he not a killer? And I didn't know while I was writing. Like, I went back and forth during that process because I was like, I don't know what I want to happen. Like, what would be more satisfying for the reader, or like what would make a better story?
And I think that's such a great process, because the idea that you don't know is exactly like Hannah. She doesn't know either whether he's really a serial killer. She even keeps track of it, all the pros and cons of whether he's guilty or not guilty. She keeps a list of, how she feels about it. So her uncertainty translates to the reader's uncertainty, which translates to the suspense of the novel. And you just nailed it, because you front load the novel a tiny bit with the first chapter being something already bad has happened. Do you want to talk about why you did this, why you structured it the way you did?
Yeah, so in the opening, she is in a situation where she's being held hostage by the serial killer, but it's still a question, like, is it this man that she's in love with, or is it someone else? Like, it's left vague as to who it is. And so I really wanted, I think, to just like up that tension, but also I place for her to reflect, right? Like, it's like, okay, I'm in this very perilous situation, but self here, right? And so, yes, like, there are all of these victims that she really feels for. Like, she sincerely like feels bad for the women that were killed, for the people that know them. And she's like, well, people aren't necessarily going to feel bad for me in the same way, because I purposefully inserted myself in the life of this alleged serial killer.
And do you hear how funny that is? That she's worried that people won't feel as bad for her as they do for the other serial killer victims, because this is kind of her fault. And this is the level of neurotic thinking that will carry you through laughing and laughing. And going back to that, you sort of front loaded with that clearly something bad happens to Hannah throughout. It is such a wonderful way of keeping the reader in suspense, because we absolutely know that something terrible is going to happen to her. We don't know when, and we don't know why, and we don't know who. So talk about layers of suspense. You built them in so marvelously. And I love that you didn't know the ending, because it kept us guessing too. I have one more question, and then we'll go to the marvelous questions in the audience. It's true, like she asked for it, says London. Yeah, and she knows she did. She's sort of tempted by the bad boy in him, as it seems some women are. You're frozen again. This is part of the suspense too. I'm sorry, Tasha, you were a little bit frozen. Talk a little bit about her lust for the bad boy and how she knows she's doing that.
Yeah, so that's something I'm obviously really interested in. So like I mentioned before, I have a really nice husband. No one would ever call him a bad boy. Like he is a total like dork. He's not a bad boy in any sense. But when I think about like the fictional characters that I'm really drawn to, like I read romantasy. I'll admit that. I saw someone use the term shadow daddy recently, which I keep thinking about, which is like you have this like sort of evil magical man who's also really bad, but also you love him. I talk a lot about reading the Twilight series when I was a teenager. And of course, I considered myself too cool to like Twilight at the time. And so I was like, oh, I ironically am reading them, but I actually like enjoyed them. And so a question I would ask my students a lot is like, are you team Edward or team Jacob? And I think that Jacob is the rational choice because you don't have to turn into a vampire. You don't have to give up your family. Jacob's not a killer. He's just a werewolf. Versus like Edward, you like kind of have to turn into a vampire. You have to give up your entire family. You can't live like a normal person. And still, like, I know in my heart, I'm like team Edward, even though it makes no sense. It's like there's a rational desire for bad boys. And so that was one of the things I was trying to capture within the book, is I think a lot of people can relate to that.
It's because he has this one little quirk of being a serial killer, but other than that, he writes beautiful letters. He's attentive. He's rich. He brings her presents. He pays attention to her. He seems to love her. So what's one little thing?
Exactly.
That is great. That is absolutely wonderful. We have so many questions. Christina is saying, enjoying this lively discussion. Darlene says, shadow daddy is a new term for me. Yes, absolutely. So, and Shannon Hansen says, cannot wait to read it. So Jenna Blum, let's go right into the questions. Jenna Blum is asking, did you write thrillers in your MFA program?
Sort of. I for a long time, I think I really wanted to be like a very serious literary writer. And then I, slowly had a series of epiphanies that that's just like not who I am. Like I like make jokes all the time. I'm much more focused on humor, and I love thrillers. So I think by the time I reached my final year, I went to a program that's 4 years long. So my MFA thesis was a thriller about sorority girls who commit murder as part of their initiation process.
So teen crime. No. Okay, joking. And so that's where you got your feet wet on thrillers.
Yeah, that I was definitely thinking about it at that point. And like, I think a good piece of advice that I heard is like, even if you're not writing a mystery novel, it's good to think of any novel as a mystery novel, right? Like you still want your reader to go on that journey to figure something out, even if it's not like, who's the killer? It's always good to sort of frame your novels in that way.
Well, every story has a question. What does someone want, and how far will they go to get it? And everyone has secrets, and what will be revealed when those secrets are told. Whether someone is murdered at the end, or whether it's just a coming of age story or a women's fiction story, there is a reason that you write a story. You say, once upon a time, listen to this, and then you tell something that's compelling. And that's exactly what you've done to great success in Love Letters to a Serial Killer, which comes out on Tuesday. Let's see if we have more questions from the audience. Susie says, hey, Susie Baldwin, which character was your favorite to write?
I really liked writing about the other women that were at the trial, Lauren and Dottie. I think because especially Dottie is like so different than me, but she like really embodies lots of women that I knew in Alabama who are like kind of gossipy and kind of catty, but also at the same time, like they're good people to have in your corner. So I really enjoyed writing them in the story.
And did you always have the three women together? Was that always part of the story, or did that evolve?
That was always part of the story. At some point, they were actually like the beginning of the story. There also used to be more of them, but I had to excise some people because it was just like getting to be too many. But yeah, they were always a big part of the story.
One of the things I love about this novel is when the first day of the trial, when William and Hannah see each other for the first time after these letters have been exchanged and after this outpouring of love, there's this really big scene where Hannah gets all dressed up to go to the trial for the first day, where the man she loves is on trial for being a serial killer. How did it feel for you to write that scene? What were the emotions in that scene? It was just so well done.
So how I thought of it is I almost thought of it like meeting someone that you've been friends with on the internet, or like in a romantic relationship with on the internet, where you're like, oh no, like what if in real life I'm a disappointment? Like I portrayed myself in this one way, but what if he sees me and I'm not what he wanted? And so I wanted to build up the tension where she's like, well, what if he doesn't want me? And so she has all these moments of panic before they finally like make eye contact across the room.
It's a wonderful scene. The whole book is absolutely wonderful. Deborah Press is asking, Sylvia. Hey, Sylvia, so glad you're here. Says, during the writing process, do you use a visual storyboard or wall to keep ideas in their proper place?
No, I probably should. I'm working on a draft of my next book right now, and my head is just like in a blender. It's like my fourth draft. And so I keep getting lost. I'm like, wait a minute, what happens in this scene, in this draft? But usually what I do, honestly, is I just like go straight through and just keep writing. And then as I write different drafts, the plot evolves or people evolve, which is why it gets really confusing. That's one of the hardest things about a novel is they're so big. Like it's this whole world to contain in your head. And for some reason, I don't have anything to assist me. I just try to hold it all up here, which doesn't always go perfectly.
I mean, it's wonderful. It's wonderful and terrible. You're holding 100,000 words in your head and motivations and people and desire in your head at the same time. And you can only sort of type one word at a time and you see what comes out. And always at some point, though, and it sounds like we write very similarly, at some point you think, oh, that's what this is about. That's what this is about. Do you have that?
Oh, yeah, all the time. So a funny story is that like a week and a half ago, I was getting ready to turn in this draft of my next book to my editors. And then I was having this conversation with my husband. And then I just had this epiphany. And I was like, wait a minute, I need to change this part of the plot. And it was like a really big, integral thing that meant deleting half of my draft. And I had to like email my editors and be like, can I have an extension for a couple of weeks? I had this great idea. And those moments are so funny. It's like, it feels like the book in its final form knows what it wants to be. And it's just like nudging you in that direction.
And then
but
when
you
you
have
find
to go through all of that.
Yes, you have to go through all that. And then when you see it, it's not terrifying. It's just so exciting that you think that's what I've been, why didn't I see that in the first place? It was all here. I just didn't look at it right. And I wrote it. I mean, that's so magical and so mystical and so rewarding.
Yeah, I keep having this feeling like I wish I could sit down in like one day and get down an entire draft, which is obviously impossible. But like that's how the ideas feel in my head. But like I'm like, I know exactly what I want to happen. I just have to get it down on the page.
Yeah. And you think you feel that, don't you? You think if I just could write for 24 solid hours, I could get this down. And of course you can't. But it just means you're excited. It means you're excited. Kim Rutter is saying, next book, do tell. Are you ready to talk about that? No.
I don't want to reveal too many details yet. I will say that there are some similarities in that it's very focused on love, but there's also murder. But there's an even bigger emphasis on like I don't know, it might seem impossible, but there's a bigger emphasis on love and like loneliness and, wanting the perfect partner.
And is it fun? Is it funny too?
Yes.
Love and loneliness, and it's funny. So, of course, that is a typical Tasha Coryell novel. I cannot wait for you to read Love Letters to a Serial Killer. Let's ask one more question, and that is from Deborah Pruss. How are you going to enjoy your first pub day? Are you doing anything special?
I am doing something special. So I decided, like, I think it's really important to celebrate things on your own terms. So, you don't want to predicate your celebration on like how many copies that you sell or how many people come to your readings. So I'm doing a couple of different things to celebrate. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm getting part of the French cover tattooed next Tuesday. So I have an appointment to get a tattoo. So that's the first thing that I'm doing. And then the second thing I'm doing is,
go ahead. Sorry, we're having a delay. Go ahead.
Oh, the second thing that I'm doing is in July, I'm having a party with like, friends and acquaintances to celebrate the release. And that's when I'll have like the cake with my book cover on it. And I just want it to be separate from the reading itself and like the actual debut week, just so it's a time to celebrate.
I love that you understand the need to enjoy something and to be present in the moment and to really embrace that you've done something that's very difficult, and you've done something that's very difficult incredibly successfully. So I wish you, there's so many congratulations in the chat, and I hope you will have time to look at that before Pub Day. It's the reading world is embracing you and so proud of you. And I just can't get over how funny and good this is. So congratulations on this. Now, one of you everybody should click and pre-order this novel. I'm allowed to say it. Tasha is not allowed to say it, but I can say, go pre-order this novel. But one of you will not have to do that. One of you will win a copy of Love Letters to a Serial Killer, given away by Tasha herself and her publisher, Penguin Random House, Berkeley. So we will spin the wheel of fun now and see who wins this fabulous book. Okay, we should hum a little tune while this spins, I think. And the winner will be Dylan Elliott. That is marvelous. Dylan, congratulations. We are so pleased that you have won this book. You will get some info on how to contact me, and I will contact our executive producer, who will contact Tasha's publisher, and you will get your book. And we are so happy, and you are so lucky to win a copy of Love Letters to a Serial Killer. The rest of you, run, and get this novel. You will absolutely adore it. Tasha, before I let you go, let me just tell you, next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, please come back, because we have a very different novel for you next week, which is not at all funny. Well, it's kind of funny in a scary way. It's called One of Our Kind by Nicola Yoon. And it is, and I'm telling you, it is Stepford Wives meets Get Out. It is a terrifying horror novel that doesn't seem like a horror novel until you're into it. So, Stepford Wives, you remember Stepford Wives and what happens in Stepford Wives. You remember Get Out, the movie Get Out, and what happens in Get Out. And this is a really brilliant and supremely thought-provoking, I can't stop thinking about this, haunting novel that's sort of an amalgam of that One of Our Kind by Nicola Yoon. But if you just want to absolutely laugh out loud and discover a character you will not forget, please read Love Letters to a Serial Killer by Tasha Coryell. Tasha, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great chat.
It was a great chat, and may you have many more. It is going to be such a hit. And thank you for coming, Tasha. And all of you, thank you for coming as well. It has been such a joy to see you, and your questions are marvelous. When I look over here, I see all of your names, and it is just, there is Deborah and Catherine and Maria, Alicia and Susie Baldwin. Everyone is here today. Kathy Graham, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. And remember, until then, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.